Can you see me okay?
Yep.
All right. Sorry to our video watchers, we're having donuts and coffee. Stop by, exactly, stop by. Make an appointment, because they may be gone if you don't. Actually, we're going to point it toward there so that they can see. Oh, okay, really? Send me some photos. Brittany thing, I'm going to open something.
Is it unobstructed?
Yeah, it's good.
Full of IRBs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, all for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Okay. Well, I just figured I'd rather show you guys a really thorough one because there's going to be so much variation in people's projects. This study has so many components that it should sort of it should address everybody's different things that they may be doing. So, let's see. How is that?
Is there any way to change the focus?
Yeah.
I wish. I mean, I guess. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yay! Ooh. And could somebody tell me why it's crooked though? Like, is the floor crooked? Because I mean, this is flat.
Maybe it's just at an angle.
Yeah. I don't think it has feet either to. Oh well. Everybody can see that.
I'm sorry, can we move it back so it's bigger?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
I just want it to fit.
I don't think they can see that.
Really? They can't?
Maybe I would just
Like
zoom.
the words on
Should I
it?
zoom in? Should I zoom in? Or
You can zoom or
move it up?
no. Oh, move the camera up. Yeah. I was gonna say. I thought you were gonna say like move this up. And she just asked to move it back. So I'm like, but I'll also just have them.
Pass it to Teresa.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just also have them pull this up. I'll email it or I'll attach. I don't think I can attach it, but anyway, on YouTube. But I'll email it, and that way they can follow along. That looks pretty good. Okay. So first we're just going to go over this RME application that you're all going to be completing. Whether you intend to turn it in or not, and do real research or not. The first section has your information, so you are a student, but you're going to be filling in the same, you're the principal investigator, you're going to be filling out the same information. If you are a student, which you all are, you have to fill in the faculty sponsor information. Now, you can put my name for that. You can also put the name of your advisor. I think if you're thinking or planning on potentially publishing this with your advisor, then it's probably best to put your advisor's name on there. But just for purposes, like if you're just handing it to me, you can just put my name.
By publishing, do you mean like your research paper going online? I was
In a journal.
sure.
Publishing it, like submitting it for journal review and.
Oh, okay.
So we write faculty sponsor, we write our supervisor, right?
But we don't know publishing dates. When is this whole shebang due?
No, it's not about publishing
Oh.
dates. It's just about that person being your co-author.
Oh, okay.
It's about making that person like officially a part of your project or not.
Another question. So like, say you want to publish it, but it can get rejected, right?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, right. Just because you submit it doesn't mean it's going to get accepted.
That would make academia a crazy
Crazy.
place to survive, right?
I would have tenure already, 14 times over. Okay.
How hard is it to like get published in a journal?
Hard.
Are there journals where it's like harder than other journals?
Yeah. There's some journals that have like really low acceptance rates. Some journals that have, more generous acceptance rates. Online journals tend to be a little bit easier, which is why they're not as highly regarded. But there's some student journals that are online journals, so it's a different thing because it's for students.
So we would be submitting to those student journals.
No, it depends on the quality of your study, the quality of your data, your findings, your, the quality of the work that you've done.
Mm-hmm.
If it's publishable, and if it's good, then I would recommend that you go for a good journal, but if it's like, okay, then you might, but you still want to try to publish, you could give it a try at a lower, less prestigious journal. Okay, so the project title is self-explanatory. Exempt status. There is a whole exempt status worksheet. So we're going to look at page 3 for the examples of what that means. Are you requesting exempt status? You do have to sign. Don't forget to sign. So what I always do is I just print out the first page, sign it, and then I scan it back in. You can just submit it that way. This study was not previously approved by the committee. This isn't a new a resubmission, so I'm not going to say anything about procedures having changed. Will data be collected from or about any of the following protected populations? So I was going to be collecting data from minors, as many of you will be. Not all of you will be. Some of you are doing your research with adults. Some people are doing it with minors. And then if you say minors, then you have to say what the age range is. And in this case, I was going to be collecting data with 3 to 4-year-olds. Will the project involve any of the following? Deception. So you're going to lie to your participants, which sometimes is acceptable and necessary, because you always tell them the truth afterwards anyway. But sometimes you're doing deception because it's an experiment. You don't want to bias them toward, one way or the other by telling them exactly what you're looking for. More than minimal risk. So risk, this is sort of going back now to our conversations early on about ethics, right? Remember, first couple of weeks, maybe second or third week of classes, we talked about ethics, we talked about protecting human subjects. Minimal risk is considered like everyday life, so if the person has to be part of your study, if they have to sort of get up, get out of bed, get on the subway, come to campus, sit down with you and talk, that's considered minimal risk. But if you're asking people to walk on a tightrope, with a blindfold on because you want to do a study on balance, that's greater than minimal risk. If you're talking to students about what it's like to be a student, what it's like to be a black student, what it's like to be taught by this particular teacher, whatever, that's considered minimal risk. If you're asking them what it was like for them to experience a traumatic event, Hurricane Sandy, they lost a parent, anything like that, that's greater than minimal risk for their mental health. So physical health or mental health. And then, are you doing a new drug, which obviously none of us are doing? If the investigator is a student, indicate if the project is a thesis, dissertation, or a class project. You would do other, honors thesis. Well, actually, thesis is, I guess, thesis will count. That's fine. A pilot study is like a mini study, which is something that you're doing as a pre to something else. So that doesn't apply for you all. So you're not doing a pilot study. This is your actual study. And then, is the project being supported by any external funding? And if so, then you would put the name of the funding agency, which won't apply to you all, but you'll just say no. Okay. And then title of the project disappears. This is all it's going to be sort of not applicable for you. Okay, so here's the exempting. Certain categories of research deemed very low risk under federal regulations may be granted exempt status once the appropriate review has been conducted. If exempt status is granted, the study will not require continuing or other review unless procedures are revised, which deviate from those originally approved by the university committee. So you can claim exempt status under the following categories. So you can check as many as apply. One is research is the study of normal educational practices in commonly accepted educational settings. It's probably inside of your. This exemption does not apply to research with children when the investigator or investigators participating in the activities being observed. For example, in classroom situations where the investigator is taking part in the classroom activities being studied. Okay, so that means not exempt if that's the case. Or if the activities are introduced for the purpose of the proposed project and are not part of the usual curriculum or activities. So in your case, you're not exempt because this is not part of the regular curriculum. You're introducing something new, so you can't claim exemption under number 1. You might be able to, as we get, you might be able to claim it under other things, but it won't apply under 1.
Could I claim under 1?
You could claim under 1 because you are studying
Adult.
normal educational practitioners doing their normal educational practice.
Right.
So when you're, as an example, if you are doing, when I do my interviews with, in Haiti, with people who are in educational reform, like members of, people who work for UNICEF, people who work for the Haitian government, if I interview teachers, if I interview like school leaders, I'm asking them questions about their job. That's considered an exempt category because, I'm just saying, like, tell me what you do and tell me what you think about what you do. I'm not saying tell me about your mom and your cousin.
So what does this exempt status mean? That I don't have to fill out the rest of the IRB?
You would still have to fill it out, but it means that you don't have to undergo, exempt status is granted, you don't have to go under continuing or other review unless you're changing your procedures. But basically they're saying this research is not, you're also being exempted from full review of the whole board. So sometimes, some studies are going to require like the whole board that meets once a month to look at every single thing that you've submitted because it's very involved. But if it's very, very basic, then there are people on the committee who can just sort of quickly, every couple of weeks or so, they take a batch and they're like, yep, this is exempt, no problem, done. Versus...
I'm just trying to understand. So exempt means that you are, when you're doing something that goes against the normal, like what they would normally be doing in the classroom, that means you're doing something, you're adding to it, or...
So you can be exempt if you're doing stuff that normally happens. If you're studying things that normally happen.
So if you're not
studying things that normally happen, then you're not exempt.
Okay.
Like if you're making someone do something that they wouldn't normally
do.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was...
Right, like that...
is that what I said?
But you said it...
I don't know.
You said it backwards?
Okay.
Yeah. You did say that, but you said that makes you not exempt. But it...
Okay.
It makes... Yeah.
Brittany is the best example. She is doing an activity with kids that is not part of the curriculum.
Right.
She is introducing something new. She is not exempt. But if... Are you doing an intervention?
An intervention.
You are doing
but
intervention.
But it's not a part of the curriculum.
Okay, so you two are also a good example. Whereas...
I'm doing test scores, so I'm exempt under 2. The use of educational tests.
We're not there yet.
Okay. Just trying to go with your example.
Yeah.
Yes and no.
Yeah. No, I just wanna be clear. So, so Brittany and Elisa are doing things. They are sort of adding on to things that are not naturally happening. Talia is asking people about things that happen. What do you do in this situation? How often? That's normal educational practice. Okay?
Yeah.
Number 2, another exempt, you can also claim exempt status if the research involves the use of educational tests. Thank you, Hea. And if you're doing surveys or interviews where identifiers are not recorded, such as anonymous surveys, anonymous interviews. So as long as you're not asking people for their name at any point, you can also request exempt status under number 2.
What if you know their name?
You're not, as long as you are not recording it, so that 13 years later someone could open a file and figure out who it is, then...
Or saying it during the interview or something.
If you were saying it during the interview and it was being recorded, then it wouldn't count as... Then they would be being identified,
So you should just be careful not to say their name during the interview if you knew the person.
Yeah. I mean, typically you
What
wouldn't...
if you type it, if you destroy the hard copy, and when you type it up, use their pseudonym, then you would be exempt because there's no way to trace them back.
Right. If you're going to blind it afterward. But mostly, that's like more trouble than it's worth. If you don't really need their names, you might as well just make it anonymous.
Yeah.
So when it says the use of educational tests, does that mean assessments?
Bless you. So, so either there's neither a risk of harm nor information sought that's sensitive, right? So like we're talking about, it's not a sensitive topic. You're just talking about sort of regular stuff. That's fine. The exemption does not apply to research involving surveys and interviews with children, okay, because children are a special category, special protected category, or to experiments such as computer simulations of decision making or laboratory tests of group interactions, or to activities involving deceit or manipulation of beliefs. None of that applies to any of us, but that's just the full explanation. Did you have a question?
I did. I was gonna say, like, I'm not doing the class thing anymore, but if I was, would that be considered like a sensitive topic?
It depends on the kinds of questions that you're asking. Just the topic itself doesn't necessarily have to be sensitive. Sometimes a topic could kind of go either way, and it depends on the nature of questions that you're asking. So say for instance that you were doing a study of people who went through Hurricane Sandy, and you wanted to ask questions like, how many days did you lose power? How much, how long did it take until you were able to move back home? How many pieces of furniture were damaged? Those would not be considered questions that are as sensitive as, how did you feel? Were you lonely? Were you lost? Did you feel, were you afraid? Did you lose, and if they lost a family? Yeah, exactly. Questions that are sort of more personal and emotional and likely to, sort of bring up a lot of other things, those would be considered kind of more sensitive questions. But the IRB, so you can you're requesting exempt status with all this stuff. That doesn't mean you'll be granted it. So they might even decide that, well, even though you're only asking these really kind of basic questions, like how many days did you not have power, how blah blah blah, that it's gonna, for some people it could trigger, post-traumatic stress, and so exactly. So it's really up to them. But you can say, well, I believe, I'm pretty sure that under this category that I can be exempt. But they're the ones who have to approve it, which is why, you don't, by asking for exempt, you can't just not submit your application, or, you don't get to decide that you're exempt. You can also get exempt if you're observing public behavior where you're not recording people's names, or there's neither risk or harm or observation of sensitive subjects, aspects of the subject's own behavior. So if you're just observing people, you go to Washington Square Park and you just want to see, those sociological classic studies where somebody will drop $1 and see how many people pick it up and what they do with it and that kind of thing. You don't need,
Lose a lot of dollars.
Lose a lot of dollars. Yeah, get somebody else to fund that.
Yeah.
Research involves the use of educational tests, etc. They are not exempt under the above category if subjects are elected or appointed public officials or candidates for public office, or federal statutes require without exception that the confidentiality of the personally identifiable information will be maintained throughout the research and thereafter. So if you're using educational tests, surveys, interviews, or observations of public behavior, they're not exempt if the people are elected or appointed public officials or candidates for public office, because I think what they would say is those people are not unidentifiable. People can figure out who it is that you're talking about, or that the confidentiality of the person will be maintained throughout the research and thereafter, based on some federal statute, if they're protected under some federal law or something. So again, exempt status can be given for any of the categories. So like I was saying, in Haiti, I was able to get exempt status even though I was interviewing some people who were public officials, but that's because they were exempt under the normal practice exemption. So it's sort of checks and balances, not exempt for this reason, but okay for that reason. And as long as the person agrees and knows that, they're being interviewed, then it's okay. Okay. You can also be exempt if the research involves only the collection of or study of existing data, documents, records, pathological or diagnostic specimens were publicly available, or the information is private but identifiers are not recorded by the investigator. So Christine, doing an existing data set, can request exempt status under number 4. If you are a historian and you're going into archives, if you are HEA and you're just going into some existing from the school, you know, de-identified, but the school is giving you just like a list of scores and things like that, then you can request exemption under number 4, collection of existing data, existing documents, and so forth. Because these are publicly available materials. Publicly available, by the way, also doesn't mean that you don't have to ask permission. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're gonna have to ask permission for some of the stuff that you want. But it's still you have to ask permission, meaning it's not available on the street. It's not like people are posting it on, you know, the wall of the building. But it's publicly available, as in, can I please have access to these data? Yeah, sure. Sign this or whatever it is. That's publicly available versus my own personal data that I have, like, in my office, in my file drawers. That's not publicly available data.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I'm getting some test scores online,
Mm-hmm.
do I need to sign up, or what do I do for that?
If it's available online, then it's literally public, like it's just information for anyone, so you don't have to get any kind of permission for that. Okay, we don't even read the taste and food exemption. Hey, you know, there are lots of people at the university. They do all kinds of research. So then you would, if you're applying for exempt status, you would complete the exempt justification statement. I believe my research qualifies for exempt status under one or more categories indicated above for the following reasons. So you have to either enter the supporting statement for the exemption by number. So I have done it before, and I just put like 1. Study is of normal educational practice. So you would just put that, or, you know, 2, study uses existing tests or something.
So you check it off and then you physically write
You
it?
can't copy and paste it. This document,
It's weird.
it's a protected PDF. So what that means is you're very limited in how, like, you can only fill things in here. You know, in these blanks, you can't fill anything in there. You might be able to copy and paste, you might not. It just depends on the level of protection that they've put on it.
So for one to be like, the study uses accepted, like the study is researching normal research.
Yeah, you would just use like the exact wording. Number 1, research is a study of normal educational practice and commonly accepted educational settings. Boom, just done. Just put that.
Are we printing this and submitting it to you, or submitting both, one to you and one to the university?
You'll submit it to me first so I can check it. Just in
The 30,
case
on the
I
20,
can.
I think you on the 23rd.
What?
To the IRB.
To me?
No, to like university.
If you're gonna do like the full, I actually haven't seen what the next due date is.
Fine.
23rd of December? Okay, I haven't seen.
If we don't have an A list, do we just leave it blank, or do like NA? Does it matter?
It depends. Like here, I didn't do NA because I wasn't applying for exempt status, but some stuff you might do NA. I mean, let's just see. Maybe something. We'll have an example. Okay, this is all about HIPAA, so this is for the people who are medical researchers. Okay, so next section that you need to worry about is the purpose of the study. Briefly, describe the purpose of your proposed research, making clear the question the research is attempting to address. Avoid the use of technical terms or discipline-specific language. Your explanation must be clear to those unfamiliar with your field. References are unnecessary. So, purpose of the study, the proposed study examines how institutional discourse about parent involvement discourses about parent involvement facilitate or constrain both the experiences of families and the potential success of children in Head Start in a sample of working class and low income Caribbean, Latino, Haitian, and West Indian immigrants in New York City. That was my study. So very simple and to the point. You know. Very brief. No more than 2 or 3 sentences. So subject selection and recruitment. Here, the concern here under this section about subject selection and recruitment is primarily that you are both thinking about not excluding anybody on the basis of anything that would be considered discriminatory practice, and also that your intentions for recruiting people respect their ability to say no. So those are kind of like the biggies for ethics when it comes to participants. So what is your expected sample size, the number of people that you expect to include,
What if you have no idea?
It doesn't matter. Just give a range. You can say 5 to 10. You can say 2 to 4. You can say, you know.
They say like less than 40. Or should
No,
range.
I would give a range. What are your criteria for inclusion of potential subjects? So they want you to say the criteria for inclusion. Okay, so potential parent participants are Caribbean immigrants, including Caribbean Latinos, Haitians, and English-speaking West Indians, whose 3 and 4-year-old children are enrolled in Head Start. Potential teacher participants can be of any ethnic or racial background. So these are my inclusion criteria.
Mm-hmm.
So for my data set, we don't know really what race they are. We just really know their age.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't. How would I?
So you would put under the like into the purpose. I would incorporate into like the purpose of the study description. I would incorporate that this is a secondary data set. The purpose of the study is to conduct a secondary analysis of of the EC, like a study, a nationally, blah blah blah. Just use the language from Michael to make it clear that this is not something that you're doing. It's already been done. And then under here, you can put the criteria for inclusion. You can just write an explanation. You can say, this is a secondary data set. I did not collect the data myself. The data were already collected, and there are no identifiers in terms of race, and blah, blah, blah. So, I'm just using the existing sample, and then you just leave it at that, it's just done.
Mm-hmm.
You could also, actually this would be an instance, for example, where you could put NA, and then in parentheses give the explanation of why it's NA.
If I'm doing an anonymous survey, then I don't know who they are, so can I write NA anonymous survey?
You would say criteria for inclusion for yours would be that the person is a teacher, right, who works with this particular population of kids. So you would just say that, and then you would say can be of any, like, participants can be of any ethnic or racial background.
Okay.
You can add as many qualifiers as you want to. Can be of any any age, racial background, whatever. But there's another question, and this is going to make more sense when we look at the other question. There's subject exclusion criteria. So just remember that they want to know who are you including, and then who are you excluding. So you don't necessarily need to list every category, because all you're saying is, I'm interested in teachers who work with kids who are on the spectrum, period. That means that by making it that broad, it means no matter what age they are, no matter what, religion they are, no matter how many years they've been teaching, blah, 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 I'm interested in including people who work with this population. And then you would say the criteria for exclusion, if there are any, would be whatever they are. Teachers who do not teach, teachers working with general population kids only, or, whatever it is. So for me, it was parents belonging to other ethnic groups, for example, who are not Caribbean immigrants as defined above, will not be eligible to participate in the study. Parents who do not have at least one 3 to 4-year-old child will also will not be eligible to participate in the study. So I set my exclusion criteria. It is perfectly fine to have inclusion and exclusion criteria that has to do with race, ethnicity, language, or whatever, depending on the purpose of your study. And then it's up to the IRB to let you know whether or not they feel that it's being discriminatory. But if you are interested, for instance, in studying like skinheads, you can study skinheads, and you can say, I'm not going to interview anybody who's not a skinhead, or whatever. It's fine. That's fair. But you just need to explain it, and then they'll decide. Yes, no, not possible, whatever. But there are some things, I'm just going to be silly with an example, but there are some things that you wouldn't be able to put in there, like, I'm not going to interview anybody who's racist. They would be like, what? Like, how would you know? That's just ridiculous, right? So you can, they're interested more in categories, not so much in like, I'm only going to interview nice people. Like, it's like, they're interested in.
You'd exclude a lot.
Exactly. So they give you the examples that they're looking for: age range, country of birth, And as you can see, I could have been like super more specific, like adults, like over 18, and all that kind of stuff. If they want to know that level of detail, they'll let you know. But by saying I'm interviewing parents, I'm interviewing teachers, they can figure it out. Okay, so don't go crazy, but just be sure to be clear. Okay, then describe in detail how the subject will be recruited. Investigators should make every attempt to use indirect recruitment methods, so where you don't make direct contact with the potential subject. So rather than going and like asking people, hey, do you want to be in my study? They would prefer that you make the information available on, there's an opportunity to participate. So they prefer, although it's not impossible to say send a recruitment email, they prefer that someone else would forward the email on your behalf, saying, I'm sending this from a graduate student whom I know, or from a student who I know, or from a professor whom I know who's interested in doing this research. They prefer that. It's not a hard and fast rule, because what they're trying to do is basically limit the amount of coercion that a
so do you want to limit your sphere of influence?
Not your sphere of influence as much as your ability to coerce. If the person knows you really well and you are sitting in their face and are like, will you be in my study? It's a lot harder for them to say no than if you sent them an email and said, would you participate in my study? If you made a phone call, right? So each degree further away from you having a direct impact on that person's ability to say no. Like students in your class, you don't want to be the one to recruit students in your class, because that's a lot, it's coercive and it's potentially problematic for those kids who are going to feel like, I can't say no to her because she's nice, and then what if she doesn't give me a good grade? So in those cases, you want someone else to do it for you. But there are times when you can contact people, quote unquote, directly, like via email, where it won't be considered really pressure, especially if you don't know them. So you're just sending them. Like, I get emails all the time from NAUIC listserv or other like AERA listservs that I'm on, which is the American Educational Research Association. Everybody knows what NAUIC is, right? The National Association for the Education of Young Children. So there's like these mailing lists, and I'm on the email list. So occasionally I'll get an email that's like from NAUIC, but the body of it would be like, dear professor, I am Judy, and I'm a master's student, and I'm doing a study, a thesis project. Would you please fill out a survey for me by clicking this link? I can clearly hit delete on that. But if it was from someone, who I know and is a student in my program, and I'm going to have to see them at the next holiday party, it's harder to say no. So you want to make it easy for people to say no, which sounds silly, but that's, you want to protect people. Mm-hmm.
So if I'm asking students to take part in intervention, would I have to go through my CT and get my CT to ask them?
So I think that you should ask Joan how this has been handled in the past, because I think in general, I would say yes, but I think potentially even the CT could be seen as coercive. So typically what we'll do is, if you're doing this for real, as in you might publish this, you probably shouldn't even do it in your class at all.
Right.
You should do it on like another teacher's class, and then that teacher can, talk to the students about it or whatever. But if you're doing it on your own class, you can only do it, I would recommend only doing it for your own class if you're really just doing it like for the thesis project and you don't plan to take it any further from there. And then you might, rather than have the CT directly ask the students or the parents, just have a flyer that would go home with the kids that like you would put in their backpack, so that you're not actually engaging directly in recruiting. Or you could also you could do that, send it in the backpack, and then you could put it up on the wall in the classroom. And then if there's like a class newsletter that goes out, it could also be a little line item in the newsletter. And it could be something like, rather than saying, you're going to write like an item in the newsletter that says, I'm doing a study and blah, blah, blah. It would be something more like your CT would just put in the newsletter. Elisa, our student teacher, is doing a thesis project and is interested in doing, in studying kids' literacy. So if you'd like to participate, please email Elisa. So then they contact you as opposed to you contacting them. By them contacting you, they are taking a step showing interest, and there is no coercion there whatsoever. They are being provided with information, and they're acting on that information, which is very different than if you were to go up to them after school every time, or you know, at drop off or pick up and say, "Hi, I'm doing my master's thesis. Would you please let your child?" That's, you know, different kind of, and you probably wouldn't want to do that. Although there are circumstances under which these things can be done. It's just that again, the IRB has to be the one to decide where the line is drawn, and whether based on, because they're going to consider all the factors, all the pieces, like how invasive is this? Is it really no harm or risk? You know, there's so many different pieces to consider that what you need to do is you need to think about the best way to do it, where you're not coercing anyone and you're being as, you know, sort of like open about everything as possible and so forth. But then you also let the IRB give you guidance and say, you know, this is whatever. But what you're responsible for is to know sort of what does the law say, like that I'm allowed to do or not allowed to do, and clearly not violate that. And then once you have followed that, then okay. So does that clarify?
Yeah. So if I'm not submitting it, because I'm looking for such a specific population, they have to be L's and non-L's. Would I, like, I'm just nervous that I'm going to send out flyers and I won't have enough to kind of fit my criteria. I mean, I am only looking for 2 ELLs and 2 non-ELLs, but so in that case, is it acceptable to go up to students and be like, "Hey, are you interested in?" No. So where?
If you're not submitting it for IRB, just ask your CT to do it for you.
Okay.
If you were doing this in real life, though,
Right.
you would. I mean, that's part of the issue. It's hard to recruit.
Right.
So you would just have to like try really hard and you know, send letters out, and that's what we do. Like when I was doing my master's thesis research, we would go to birth records. The way that we found our participants was because we wanted kids between was the age 36 to 50 months or something like that, or whatever, 24 to 48. I think it was 20, whatever it was. Anyway, it was some kind of range. And so we had to go to birth records, which are public, and look up the kid's birth born between this date and this date, and then go to the phone book and look up the number, and then call and say, "Is this, you know, the home of blah blah? I'm a researcher from UNC Greensboro. May I please send you a letter about this research study that we're doing?" And they would say yes or no, and then, you know.
That's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Did you get a lot of yeses?
Principal probably wouldn't say it. That just sounds scary. Like, I don't know who you are. You come over to phone club. Not that your research probably wasn't super important.
No, but every recruitment strategy has its ups and downs, has its, you know, pros and cons and its complications, and you basically just have to feel it out for whatever the situation is, what makes the most sense. And obviously by using the phone book, we also missed out because people move, they change their names, they, you know, all kinds of they change their number. There are all kinds of ways that in itself was difficult, but we were looking for kids who were not necessarily in school. So how else were we gonna find them? You know?
Community centers? Shopping mart? No,
Yeah,
not
I mean
shopping.
that.
But like, you know,
Well,
you
if
go
they're shopping during the day.
If they're shopping during
then-
the day, you can't leave the kid at home. Probably not using. If you're probably not using a babysitter, you're gonna go to the grocery store.
Then you're doing direct.
No, you put
No,
it.
then you're in their face. Oh, you put it like.
a flyer, like a to the cashiers. You put it on one of those. I don't see them in New York, but apparently some areas have like message boards
Yeah.
in the grocery store.
And then very few people read those.
Yeah, exactly.
Only a handful of people read
How
the
are you
message
supposed to
boards.
get
So.
people to participate if you're like, let me put it in like the corner of the newsletter that nobody reads in the school. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really.
Probably have it so much
But it's also like, okay, so when I was doing my research in Boston with immigrant youth, the way that I recruited was that I held information sessions, which I was allowed to do. I was given permission by the IRB based on all the, again, there's so many different pieces, so based on their assessment of the entirety of the research, they deemed that it was appropriate for me to say and give flyers to kids and make announcements and have the teachers make announcements that on Tuesday at 2, if you want to go to this recruitment session for this researcher who's doing a study of Haitian kids, you will be excused from class. You'll be given an excuse pass. So the information session is coming up. If you're interested, go to that information session. The information session was a group session. It wasn't like me going up to individual kids. It was, there's an information session at 2 on Tuesday. Anybody is welcome to come. You come, you hear about what it is that I'm doing. At the end of the presentation, I say, if you're interested in participating, here is the consent form that your parents need to sign. And then I would give them the consent form. And I mean, they also did allow us to ask the school to identify kids who were Haitian. I was doing a study of the bigger project I was part of was looking at kids from all different backgrounds, but mine was looking at US born Haitian kids. And they allowed me to ask the school to provide a list of potential participants. And then from that, we like targeted announcements to the classes where those kids were. And then those kids were allowed to invite other kids. And that's another way that people often do recruitment or is sampling is snowballing. So if you can only get one kid, you can ask the kid, do you know anybody else who might want to do this? Would you tell them about my study and give them my, tell them to call me or whatever it is. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. What did I say my recruitment strategy was going to be? How was I going to identify potential subjects? So the NYC administered ACS for Head Start office keeps data on the primary language spoken in the homes of Head Start families, one category of which is a Caribbean language.
What does that mean?
What, a Caribbean language? Don't ask me, ask them. Data on the ethnic composition of neighborhoods in New York City also will be investigated. Programs with the largest number of Caribbean immigrants will be identified and recruitment will be conducted in these centers. So the idea was to, if they said it's a Caribbean language, which means it could be Creole, any kind of like Caribbean English or Caribbean French or Caribbean, whatever they consider a Caribbean language, I was interested in Caribbean parents. So whatever they call it, that works for me. I'm going to try to recruit them. And then also some neighborhoods in New York City, are stratified and segregated with one particular ethnic group. Like, oh, this neighborhood is heavily Dominican. So I know that most of the kids attending that Head Start are going to mostly be Dominican. So that's a good place for me to go recruit because that they fit under the my criteria. How are we doing on time, by the way? I'm feeling like 2:52. Oh boy. Okay. I don't think we're going to have time for these presentations. But this is important, you guys really need to know this. So, where and how will potential subjects be informed of the opportunity to participate? Include copies of recruitment letters, flyers, or advertisements, and or a copy of the oral and written statements to be used at the time of recruitment of subjects. So I said I will contact Head Start centers in the Caribbean immigrant enclaves to tell them about the study and ask them to post flyers in the centers regarding the study and to send flyers and recruitment letters home with children. So I asked the center directors to do this, right? I'm not doing it myself. Directors and teachers also will be asked to announce the study at meetings where parents are present. All recruitment material will be translated into Spanish and Haitian Creole. A copy of the recruitment letter, flyer, and oral statement. English versions are included as appendices A through C. Once a parent has agreed to participate, and therefore to have his or her child's teacher contacted, see the statement of subjects below in Appendix D, the teacher will be informed of the opportunity to participate. So I was recruiting via parents, and then if the parents said yes, then I would try to get the teacher as well, as opposed to doing it through the teachers and then getting the teachers to get parents. It doesn't really matter. That was just, I was interested in parent involvement, and so if a parent said yes, then I wanted to know if the teacher of that parent's kids would also be willing to participate. So let me just show you.
So for all of these, would I just keep writing over and over again? This is not my study. This is not my study.
You would just put NA. Like once you explain the NA and the first sort of big explanation, you would just continue to put NA.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't have to.
But I don't I'm recruiting. You said.
Yeah, no, but
like my recruitment stuff is gonna be like emails. Like I'm gonna give the survey to you and to Maris, and you guys are gonna try and help make contact. So like mine are not gonna be extensive, like 1 to 2 sentences. Like I'll be giving the survey to my program director and my thesis advisor. They will be sending it out. Like okay.
Yeah. Just what you're you're gonna do. That's all. I'll show you my flyer.
I also that you wrote that like like you had some stuff done that we definitely don't have done. Like I don't have my survey written, and I'm
Right.
sure no one has their intervention lesson plan written either.
Right. So if you don't have a full version to show, you still need to submit something. So in the past, when I haven't had like a concrete, especially because I'm mostly a qualitative researcher who does like very conversational interviews, and I'll have an interview guide, but I don't have a concrete set of these are the 10 questions that I'm going to ask. So what I'll say is the interview will cover the following topics, okay? The wording of questions will, the interview will be in an informal format. So the wording of the questions may change, but here are the main areas that I'm looking for, and I might list like 3 or 4, and then say, for example, like example questions include, and then I'll list like 2 or 3 example questions. If you are doing an intervention, but it hasn't been, you haven't worked out every single thing yet, you still know generally what it's going to be about, and you still have a general sense of what, so just describe, to the extent that you can, describe what it is that you're planning to do. And it's not going to be necessarily perfect, but okay, so here's my English version flyer. We made a ton of copies of those. We, posted them everywhere. My doctoral student and I went and helped me post them all over the place. So that just gives, very general information.
Did flyers work?
The flyers weren't as good as, and this is usually the case, the flyers were not as good as snowballing, but, that happens, and that's usually the case. So here was my recruitment letter, explaining, this is who I am, I'm writing to invite you to participate, I'd like to understand, this is the purpose of my study. If you're an immigrant parent, you're interested in finding out more, please contact me. I can be reached via, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, right? So this is like informational about my study. I'm not saying participate, you have to, nothing. I'm just saying, and I'm saying if you're interested, contact me. You are the one who has decided to contact me. I'm not coming after you, hounding you, or anything like that. Although sometimes it kind of feels like you are hounding people after a while, because like say the teacher's like, this person really is whatever, or they told me they were interested, and then they never call you, and you're like, but they never came to the whatever. Yeah, but they said they wanted to do it. So then you have to be very, delicate about how you go about it.
So I want to recruit parents to to get permission for their kids, and I want to send a survey out. Can I send the recruitment letter and the survey out together, so it's just less back and forth?
Is there any way that you can make the survey online?
Yeah.
So that you could, and is there any way that you can do email recruitment?
Because I would have to get the emails, permission to get the email addresses of the parents.
Or ask your teacher to do it before you see to forward it for you or something like that?
Online?
I'm just wondering if it might not be, because in general, I mean, and this is it's really funny. Of course, I still don't think I would have necessarily gone online format for this particular study, but when I did this 6 or 7 years ago, it was still a different world in terms of online recruitment and online research. And the funny thing is, it's only been 6 or 7 years. That's not a really long time, yet in the technology world, that's a really long time. So it's a lot of the stuff that are simple surveys that I would have done many years ago in hard copy, today I would do it. I would just be like, here's a link, fill it out, and it's done. So, ask. Ask your not everybody has email, not everybody has access to computers, so that depends on the population of your school. But ask your CT, ask your advisor, get some advice, think about it, and you might do both. You might say, but I'm trying to decide if you should send it at the same time. I'm kind of thinking no, because then they haven't, unless it's totally anonymous and they basically, by filling it out, they've given their consent.
Right, but it can't be anonymous because I have to know who their child is to do the workshop with.
Oh,
the kid.
right.
But
Yeah.
I want to, as soon as I get that person's name, I could change everything to just
Yeah,
an
a
ID
student,
number.
right,
so,
exactly, right.
So nobody's identified.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think you're gonna have to figure out for that school and the population and so on, like what is the best method to do it. I would hesitate though to send them both at the same time. Yeah. First I would just try to get them to respond and say I'm interested, and then you would give them, because you have to still go through the consent process with them. Okay, how will subjects will be able to let the investigator know they wish to participate? Recruitment materials include my contact information so that they can contact me directly.
Or they will fill out the survey.
Right. So a lot of the online ones that I get, and I can actually I may have deleted it. There was one I just received on people who are like teacher educators. There was somebody who was doing a study of teacher educators, and the wording of her letter, her recruitment letter, said something like by clicking this link and doing the sub. It was basically saying by clicking this link and taking the survey, you give your consent. You know, so like I don't have to go through a whole consent form and signature with you, because this is anonymous. These data are being collected anonymously, and by doing it, you're saying consent. Or like Rose was saying, I think she's done this before, getting email consent. Like someone can email you their consent and say, I agree to participate. Very simple. They don't necessarily have to physically sign. And that's something that I know colleagues have done, and because people were advising me to do it with international research, because it's hard. Like I have my consent form, and I was trying to get my Haitian participants to like email me, you know, or fax me a copy of their consent form. A lot of people don't have fax machines, there's limited power, whatever. So I said, you know, would it be okay for me to just say to the participants, like to IRB, I said, if I can get signed consent, I will. But in the event that I can't, if the person emails me and just says, I agree to participate, I'm just going to consider that consent. And I just wrote that, like, this is how I plan. And then if they had had a problem with it, they would have said, no, you can't do that. But they approved it. So that means, okay, great, this is an acceptable form of consent. Statement to subjects. What will the investigator tell potential subjects once they've indicated interest in the study? How will the investigator tell them? By letter, phone call, email, presentation to a group. So the statement to the subject should include information on the purpose of the study, what subjects will be asked to do if they participate, where the study will be carried out, how much the subject's time participation may take, and what type of information they might be asked to provide. It should also make clear that participation is voluntary and that subjects may withdraw from the study at any time. So on the IRB website, there's actually like a template or like a wizard. So I think it's called like consent form wizard or something, or may not even be called wizard. But anyway, there's something that you can go through where you just fill out the key information, like your name, whatever, and then it does the form for you automatically. It's kind of nice. I'm gonna see if I can find it.
But again, if we're doing an anonymous email survey, that would be like, I will outline this in the email that is sent to the participants, and they know that by clicking the link to enter the survey, that they are offering, they are
giving consent. Exactly.
Excellent.
Exactly. Okay, so here's what I said. Once potential participants indicate an interest in the study, they'll be mailed 2 consent forms. The consent form for parents, which, you know, that's Appendix D. I'll then contact parents by telephone, read the consent form for parents to them out loud, and invite parents to ask additional questions. The signed consent forms will be picked up at the first scheduled interview with the parent. Teachers of children whose parents consent to participate in the study will be given the consent form for teachers by hand. I will read the form to them out loud and invite them to ask additional questions. The signed teacher consent forms will be picked up at the first scheduled interview with the teacher. So there's 2 consent forms. There's one for parents, one for teachers in my study, because I want to do interviews with both. So you read very descriptive. Like I just said, this is what I'm going to do, and I say this is what I'm going to do, knowing that the IRB could say, no, we don't want you to do that. But I'm still telling them what I'm planning to do, right? That's the thing. You just describe what it is. Harm or benefit. This is the statement where you're going to say, you know, describe any potential harm, risk, or benefits to subject. I say there's no risk from participating beyond that of everyday life, and there are no direct benefits. So you're not going to, you know, your kid's not going to get into my special school by participating. There's nothing special about this. It's no risk and also no direct benefits.
But that's the best situation, right? Like,
exactly, because then there's no
incentive.
Intensive, right? Exactly. No coercion. If you like, a lot of times, especially if you're interviewing professionals, but sometimes also if you're interviewing adults who are like family members, you have to pay them to do the interview. Like, it depends on whatever they deem is appropriate. Typically nowadays, for a professional, it's $40 for an interview. For someone who's not, like, say you're interviewing a parent, not about their job, their work outside of, then it would be like $30. But that's not considered a benefit. That's just a compensation.
For taking
Or an
time off
incentive.
from work
Right,
or something.
exactly. Right. Did somebody else have a question?
Yeah. If I'm putting the students through an intervention, it would potentially benefit them, right?
Yeah. So you could say it could potentially benefit them, participating in the, like, students who participate in the intervention. Now, in your case, if you're going to have a control group, meaning kids who are not going to do the intervention at all, if you're going to have any kids, are you going to have any kids?
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Or you're not sure?
I don't think I need a control group.
Okay.
Maybe I do. I don't know. Okay.
I mean, if you want to set up a true experiment, you have to have a control group. It just
Right.
depends on if you want to do that or not. That's a research design level decision. If there are going to be direct benefits to subjects, like, so say for instance, participating in this intervention could help some children, with their comprehension, then a lot of times they'll ask you, okay, so then for the control group, what are you going to do to also, so that they don't miss out, in other words. And so what a lot of researchers will do is, I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago, that sometimes if you're doing a control group study and there's an intervention, then you would say, during the period of the study, there will be these two groups, but then once the study is finished, the intervention will be provided to the control group so that everybody has an equal opportunity. Not that they're going to benefit, but everybody has an equal opportunity for the potential of benefiting from my fabulous intervention. Okay, this is really annoying. It just keeps on showing up. Okay, thank you so much, Teresa.
No problem.
Procedure to be followed. Where will it be conducted? What will they do? So these are the questions that you're answering, A through F. So I said the study will be carried out over the course of 2 academic years. Data will be collected from 7 sources. Ethnographic observations, participant and non-participant, ethnographic interviews, field and reflexive notes, focus group interviews, documents from Head Start centers, parent and teacher versions of the parent-teacher involvement questionnaire, and assessments of children's performance. So then for each one, I had to describe what am I doing?
Oh my god.
From my ethnographic observations, I'm going to do this is why. Here's how. I'm not going to read all this. The goal of ethnographic interviews will be this, that, and the other. Here's what I'm going to do.
Should ours be this long?
You won't have this many components to your study. Then I have record notes from interactions in the field, focus group interviews, existing documents, the questionnaire. So this is where, like, Christine will list all the measures that were given. So here, like, this paragraph would be, like, your section of this will probably just say these were the measures that were administered for the study, is it the NELSI that you guys are using, or the ECLSK? Okay, so the measures that were used for the ECLSK that I'm using for my study include, and then you would just list. Say one of them was the parent-teacher questionnaire, and this literally is like, this paragraph comes from the research project website. I did not reinvent the wheel. You don't have to, if you're using an existing thing, I know you're also thinking about using these, just take what is the description of it, paste it in. Or retype it if it won't let you paste. Which, sadly, I can't promise that it's not.
And you're talking about the website that describes this study.
Yeah, all the different measures. Exactly. And then these particular measures will be administered during year 1 and year 2. So, it's just a lot of details. And then data on children's performance. What data am I collecting? How am I going to, collect it? And so on. So these are the different components of Head Start assessments that I was going to be using. Data on children's performance using the ongoing assessments from Head Start and also the national reporting system. So I describe them, get all the descriptions from, online sources of, how they describe it, and then that's what I included. So again, you all won't need to go into this level of detail, but you will just need to describe and say, for instance, I'm going to be sending out a 20-question survey.
I didn't got that far yet.
Let's just say, 20-question survey. The topics to be covered include blah blah blah. Some sample questions include blah blah blah. I'm in the process of creating the survey. And then you would say something like, the survey should take, no more than 30 minutes to complete. Participants can complete the survey wherever they wish. It will be anonymous. So just describe exactly what it is that you're planning to do. How are we doing on time?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Five minutes. Okay.
I think we can make it.
Okay. Confidentiality. We talked about this a lot when we were discussing ethics. So, how and where the data will be stored, who will have access, how long will the data be kept, what will happen to the data after the study is completed. So, confidentiality of participants will be protected by assigning an ID code. ID codes and identifying information will be filed separately. Data will be stored in a lockable file cabinet in my office. I and members of my research team will have access. The data will be retained indefinitely, meaning I'm not saying after 5 years I'm going to destroy it. I'm saying it's mine and I want to keep it for as long as I want. Confidentiality will be maintained by keeping the data separate from the coding file used to assign codes to each participant. So in my case, I didn't do anonymous. I did confidential. So I knew their ideas and I asked them to sign the consent forms, but when I assigned an ID number, I didn't put that ID number on anything that had their name. And then I also did have, you're allowed to have a record of who's who. So I have, I create these Excel spreadsheets where I have the participant ID number and the person's name, so that I don't mix things up. And then I'll have a separate file where I have the ID number and the pseudonym that goes with it, because I usually write qualitative stuff, so I'm usually saying and Christine said, but Christine isn't really Christine. So I keep those things separate. I don't do real name, ID number, and then fake name. I do real name and ID number, and then that's one file, and another file is ID number and name, so that you can't just walk into my office and get on my computer and figure out exactly who I interviewed and all that kind of stuff. It's really just about protecting your participants. And if you were to break into my file cabinet and you were to see people's consent forms and you were to see their signed names, you still shouldn't be able to figure out from my